I start out the book writing about this time that I was analyzing an Islamic State beheading video. And I was like trying to sort of like impress the boss.
Why are you analyzing that video?
So that video was it had cropped up at some point. Like it was, I think it came out in the Islamic State magazine. I think it was called Dabak. But you know, if it's just a regular video, them sort of talking about the normal stuff, you know, then it's probably geopolitically irrelevant and you can kind of toss it. But this one specifically was in Farsi. So it wasn't in Arabic. And the people who were being beheaded were in the uniforms anyway of the popular mobilization units, who are Shia-backed or Iran-backed Shia militias that operate in Iraq. And so I was watching the video to see if there was a way of determining that this was definitely an Islamic State message to Tehran, right? And as I was watching this thing and, you know, realizing that I was finding myself becoming more and more paranoid and liking the world a whole lot less the more I studied warfare. I mean, you know, go figure. I was realizing that there's no way for me to actually determine this, right? Because, yeah, like you can put those uniforms on anybody. You can put that insignia on anybody.
Right.
So does it mean that something's going to happen tomorrow? Like, is the Islamic State going to roll some tanks into Iran? Or not tanks anyway, like, you know, Toyota Hiluxes? Like, are they gonna do that? Like, probably not. But it was like, that was the only thing that I had to analyze that day. And, you know, you get on these cryptic phone calls and they're like, what do you have? And you have to like spit out this brief without like stumbling on a single word. And by the end of my brief, they were like, nope, that's irrelevant. Don't worry about it. So like I had, you know, in my art colony in Los Angeles, I'd spent the morning like watching beheading videos, and it wasn't even 7 a.m. yet.
Oh,
like
God.
my coffee shop wasn't even open yet.
Before you had your coffee,
yeah,
people's heads get cut off.
Yeah. And so like, I was like, and I remember like looking at, you know, cause I definitely had like I leaned into the stereotype, like I had a yarn wall in my room. It never really got to yarn wall status. I bought yarn, but I never like put anything up that was like too arts and craftsy for me. I know it. I know. I wish I had a picture of that. But yeah, like I was looking at all the maps on the wall, and I'd done a lot of traveling before, and I love traveling, and I like liking the world. And I realized as I was looking at now, after, you know, a couple of months of just researching how the world was tearing itself apart, that I really not only didn't like the world, but I was pretty afraid of it. And that was not a great headspace to be in. And at the same time, I was also like the worst person to sit next to at a bar, because I'd just be like, oh, did you hear about these missiles? Like... You know about you know about the range of that missile? You ever hear about this World War I treaty? It's like that nobody wants to sit next to that guy at a bar.
Right.
So like I had to make a change. And fortunately I got fired like a month later. So but while I was looking into the Middle East, especially the Islamic State at the time, you know, the Kurds in Iraqi Kurdistan were this enormous force in beating back the Islamic State out of northeastern Iraq.
Right.
And so they were using this political capital that they had at the time, so this was in 2017, in order to launch a referendum on independence from Baghdad, right? And so I had been reading about this area constantly, and of all of the stories that you read in the news, it's so rare that you find one where you're like hopeful about it. And it's like, and it's exciting, where you're like, this is an independence movement. Not only is it an independence movement, but it's one that's done through basically democratic means. Like it's a new country that could potentially vote itself into existence.
Right. And
so as I started researching it, I was like, and, you know, as I was done watching beheading videos, I was like, you know, because anytime you lose your job, you're like, oh, man, well, if I could do anything in the world, what would I do? And I was like, I want to go see the referendum on independence in Erbil in Iraqi Kurdistan. And so, like, I Googled jobs in Iraqi Kurdistan, and I found a job as a third grade teacher. And so like 2 weeks later, had a ticket to northern Iraq.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
Teaching what, English?
I was basically 3rd and 4th grade. In the book I call it the Kurdistan International School, but it's a Lebanese school system called Sabas. And they, put me up, gave me an apartment, and and paid me okay for the area. Wow. But it was third grade, 4th grade, social studies, homeroom, and English.
By yourself?
Yeah.
Jesus.
I mean, there were other international teachers at the school, but yeah, just went out there, and that was like a great way to basically start trying to figure out about, trying to start writing about things where it wasn't the world tearing itself apart. It was actually new things being created. But of course, that didn't actually end up happening for the Kurds in Iraqi Kurdistan. So while I was there, I was obviously teaching, but I was also meeting other journalists and talking to NGO workers. Made great friends with some of the locals, and was watching and waiting as this vote for independence was happening. And it's amazing how the city, Erbil, started to feel as it got closer to this vote, because there was so much uncertainty in the air. The larger regional powers did not want, and still do not want, this independent Kurdish region. And the reason for that is because the Kurds are the largest stateless group of people in the world. So there are about 35 million Kurds. They're spread across in one sort of unbroken band across from the Zagros Mountains in Iran and Iraq, all the way down to Syria and through a large portion of Turkey. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's a
this
big
is the Wikipedia version of the Kurdish nationalism.
Yeah. And so, yeah, the notable Kurdish dynasties, shout out to Saladin the Great. He was the leader of the Ayyubid dynasty.
So so where did they come from?
They were a nomadic person group that was I mean, they're originally from the Zagros Mountains area.
Right. Mm-hmm. But why? So what did the word Kurd come from? So
I've heard that, and sometimes, like, I don't know if this is just like a general reading of it. I've heard that it relates to tent dwellers, so nomadic tribes people. Okay. But I didn't include that specifically in my book because I couldn't confirm it. Right. Basically, so this is the flag of Iraqi Kurdistan, and it's important it's important to understand too that there are many different Kurdish governments, Kurdish languages, and Kurdish groups that are contained within the larger area that the world would consider Kurdistan, or certainly Kurds would consider Kurdistan. Okay. So there are there's a Kurdish region of Iran, there's a Kurdish region of Turkey, there's a Kurdish region of northeastern Syria, and also Iraq. Each has ostensibly different governmental systems and even sometimes different languages, so Kurdish languages. So in Iraqi Kurdistan, they speak a language called Sorani, but you also have Kurmanji, which is a majority Kurdish spoken language. Okay. And one of the reasons that these regional powers don't want any sort of independence movement from certainly Iraqi Kurdistan is that it'll animate independence movements in these other countries. So Turkey doesn't want a Kurdish independence movement to happen within its borders. Yeah. So this red area here, this is the disputed area between Iraqi Kurdistan, which is in the green, and then the disputed area is in the red there. And so while I was there, the Kurdish referendum on independence happened, but immediately Baghdad was like, hey, you super aren't independent, and you're also not taking Kirkuk with you. So the reason that Kirkuk is important is because this a huge amount of oil comes out of Kirkuk. Okay. Back in the day, Saddam Hussein was like, I got too many Kurds on that oil land, so I got to move a bunch of Arabs up there and what he called Arabize the area, so that he would have.
So which part of this map were you at?
Erbil, right there. That's where I was teaching 3rd grade.
Erbil.
Yep.
Okay, you were in Erbil.
I was.
So it's the green zone right here.
Yeah, correct.
And why is that green? What does that say on the bottom? What's that little?
So that's the area of the Kurdistan Regional Government.
Okay, got it.
So it's an autonomous region within Iraq.
Got it. Okay. It's just an autonomous region that Iraq, they leave it alone.
I mean, yeah, there's
To an extent.
to an extent, yeah. It's a
Is it kind of like similar to how Eastern Ukraine was sort of like a lot of Russians were there and
there's a differentiation in government.
Okay.
Definitely.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So there is a government that is run independently, but it has direct relationship with Baghdad. It's under the control of Baghdad.
Okay.
And so when they tried to vote themselves independent in 2017, Baghdad reasserted its control and decided to basically go to have a small war over Kirkuk with the Kurdish fighters to
wow.
ensure that Kurdistan, the Iraqi Kurdistan, never took the oil-producing region with them. And so at the same time, Iraq basically said, okay, also all your airports belong to us and we're shutting down your airspace. And, you know, at this point I was sort of early on in wanting to write about unrecognized nations, and I didn't realize that my book wasn't going to just be about Iraqi Kurdistan. That's what I thought it was going to be. But then I decided to leave Iraqi Kurdistan because I was going to see my girlfriend, who was a Fulbright scholar in Bulgaria at the time. So what, you know, the school had told me was like, okay, well, you know, if you leave, you might not be able to come back in because, like, you certainly can't come in through the air because Iraq or
airspace.
Yeah, Baghdad shut down the airspace. So I was like, okay, I'll leave Iraqi Kurdistan on a bus. I'll just take a bus across the border and then fly from this place called Sirnac. I don't know if that's how it's pronounced. In eastern Turkey.